Thank you for watching Mike's in the Garden, where it's my mission to inspire you to grow food. And today we're doing that with my man Pablo from Eco Hustle, and we're going to be doing a little workshop for you on Bokashi composting. So why don't you introduce yourself and talk a little bit about what it is you do with Bokashi Compost and Eco Hustle.
Sure. Well, thank you, Mike, for providing this platform for me to share this, what I like to call the gateway into composting. First off, Pablo with Eco Hustle. Essentially, what Eco Hustle is I'm a composter. I do, you know, backyard composting, small scale composting, and what Eco Hustle is about is I like to integrate the things that I do in my life into my hustle, and that's composting. And I'm using composting as a way to hustle and teach and educate and whatnot. So that's kind of like the spiel about Eco Hustle, just holistic hustling, trying to, hustle in a way that integrates the things that you're interested in. And in terms of Bokashi composting, I guess I'll just give a background about that, like how I got into it shortly. I got into Bokashi composting through worm composting. And I think that's what composting is. Like, it's a gateway. It'll get you into so many different things. And I was vermicomposting, which is composting with worms. And worms take their time with food scraps. And what I noticed was that my worms wasn't going through my food scraps fast enough, so I wasn't able to collect all the food scraps that I was generating. So I was taking up a lot of space in the fridge and whatnot, and not able to generate the food scraps as fast as I can. So I was trying to figure out what type of system, like what else can I do besides, thermophilic composting? Because I was kind of intimidated by that. Plus, I'm in an HOA, and I was there's some of the red tape there. But the other thing that I want to say was I was trying to find a food source for my worms that they can eat faster, right? Worms basically eat the bacteria that is being, the pre-digested materials on the organic matter. So it takes, like, the food scraps that you take, that you feed your worms, you got to feed them slowly, because otherwise you're going to be attracting other insects and pests and whatnot. So you want something, a material that is going to break down quickly, or that the worms can break down quickly, so you don't, you know, harvest other pests and whatnot. And Bokashi is actually pre-digested materials. What you're doing is you're pre-digesting it, and the worms are actually gonna eat that material up much quicker. So not only did I find through Bokashi, stumbling on Bokashi through worm composting, that the worms will like that material because it's pre-digested, but also I'm able to collect um, the food scraps that I was generating much quicker with Bokashi. So Bokashi became like uh, this companion system to vermicomposting. And that's kind of how I stumbled upon Bokashi, through vermicomposting. And I still do vermicomposting. And I haven't combined it yet, because I have a story that I'll share in a second. But I stumbled upon Bokashi through vermicomposting, and it is a great way to generate your food scraps, uh, go through your materials much quicker than vermicomposting can.
Excellent. Well, I'm excited to get into this workshop and see and learn more about Bokashi. Like I said, I learned about it through cannabis, and um, I've already forgotten most of what I learned. So that's why you're here today, and we're going
Yeah,
to share this video with the great viewers out there so that they can learn. And all right, I'll let you take it over.
sounds good. All right. Um, all right. So let's jump into. I just want to give a quick overview of some of the terms, because I'm going to be speaking about a lot of things, and I'll be using terms interchangeably. So I kind of just want to give a little just definitions of some of the terms that I'm going to be talking about, so you can follow through with me. So when I say Bokashi, I'm talking about the process of fermenting food waste. We're going to talk more about Bokashi, But when I say Bokashi, it's the process. When I talk about EM, um, e- effective microorganisms, I'm talking about the organisms, the beneficial microbes that are infused into a substrate, or the effective microorganisms, the beneficial microorganisms that are fermenting the food waste. So these are the microbes that are actually, pre-digesting the food waste. So when I say EM, I'm talking about effective microorganisms. That is the culture that is used in the Bokashi process. When I say Bokashi grain, I'm talking about the actual substrate that has been infused with the mother culture. This is a mother culture, the effective microorganisms, the liquid. You say EM1, we're talking about the liquid version of the mother culture. So Bokashi grain is the dry version, the kind of carbon version of the mother culture per se. So now that we have the overview of the terminology, let's get into what Bokashi is. So like I said, Bokashi is a fermentation process. It is actually not a composting process. And we're going to talk about how it becomes composting through the other processes, through the other stages of Bokashi. But Bokashi is a fermentation process. And what happens is you're taking the microbes, the mother culture, and you are fermenting your food scraps through that process. And what's happening, unlike thermophilic composting, you have, with thermophilic composting, you have heat and you have an aerobic process where, you're breaking down the organic matter. With Bokashi, you're actually fermenting these matters through an anaerobic process. So with thermophilic composting, you have aerobic process, and with Bokashi is an anaerobic process. But what you're doing is you're fermenting the food scraps, and the culture that you have in that vessel, in that process, is lowering the pH to the point where it is halting decomposition and triggering fermentation. The same way you have with any type of fermentation, with like sauerkraut or anything like that, you're using the lactic acid to, lower the pH, and that is what is locking in and, turning on that whole fermentation process. I like to use the illustration of sourdough to compare Bokashi, to kind of have just an illustration for people to understand the whole process of it. So it's very similar to sourdough fermentation. With sourdough, you have a starter culture, right? The starter culture in Bokashi is the EM culture, the effective microorganisms. This is the starter, right? And the same way in sourdough, you have the feed, right? The feed in this system is the food scraps. So we're feeding the culture the food scraps. And then in sourdough, you also have a discard, right? In Bokashi, the discard is your finished Bokashi. After the whole process has finished from start to finish, and we're going to talk about that whole process. But after the process has been finished, you have a discard. And what you're doing with that discard is you're taking it and you're integrating it into the soil or into another system. And that is the discard. So unlike sourdough, you can't use, I won't say you can't, but it is recommended not to use the discard as for a new batch. So the discard in this situation, or let's say the mother culture, like you wouldn't use more of the Bokashi grain, which is the substrate that has been infused with the mother culture. You wouldn't use some of that material to make a new batch. You can, and I've had people ask me, like, if you can, but you want to make sure that you have a high or a good quality grain for your new fermentation batches. So it's all about having good quality grains to make sure that you have a successful ferment, if that makes sense. So I like to use another analogy with cooked food and fermented food, and kind of comparing that with, thermophilic composting and Bokashi composting. So like I said before, with thermophilic composting, You're losing, some of the nutrients due to heat and oxygen and all that process. The same thing with cooked food. When you're cooking your food, you're kind of losing some of those nutrients through cooking it. But when you ferment your foods, you're locking in those nutrients, and that's the similar. That's the process with Bokashi. You're locking in all those nutrients, and you're not losing them due to the heat and all that kind of transfer of the molecular process that's happening with all the heat and whatnot and the extremes. So you lose some of the nutrients when you're cooking your food, when you're doing thermophilic compost, and with fermented food, when you're fermenting your food, you're preserving the nutrients the same way with Bokashi. And that has some really great attributes when you're adding it to your soil. You're adding all these locked in nutrients back into your soil when you do Bokashi. And one of the things I do want to say about Bokashi, especially for Florida, like I think we can harness, we can really use this opportunity to try a different type of composting method in Florida with Bokashi because of our heat, because of the soil that we have that is nutrient devoid, and we can put these nutrients back into our soil with Bokashi. We can do different things in Florida, like banana composting and integrating Bokashi into it. We don't have to do there's so many different ways to composting. I'm not saying that Bokashi is like the one size fit all, but it's just another tool that you can add and companion to all your other composting systems. With like Bokashi works really well with banana composting. Banana composting is basically where you take bananas in a circle, you dig a pit, and you compost in the middle of that pit so that your bananas can, feed off of that organic material. So you're growing food and you're composting at the same time, and then you can integrate Bokashi into that compost pit as well. So being in Florida, there's so many ways that we can try alternative composting methods, and I think Bokashi is a really great composting, fermenting, and composting method that we can integrate into our environment here, because our soil just needs to eat so much because of the heat and just the lack of nutrients. So going along, I want to talk about the origins of Bokashi. So Bokashi is actually a really it's an old ancient technique that has roots in East Asian farming practices, but it was revamped in the 1980s by a professor called Teruhiga, and he's the professor that basically coined the term effective microorganisms. So let's talk about the origins of Bokashi. It originates in East Asia. It has ancient practices. It's hundreds and thousands of years old. The Bokashi practice. It was basically revamped in the 1980s by a professor by the name of Dr. Teru Higa. He experimented with a whole bunch of a concoction of microbes, and he found that he was able to combine these three groups of microbes together so that they can work cohesively and not compete against each other. Those groups of microbes that he has, there's many different strains of bacteria in there, but the three main groups that he has is lactic acid bacteria, yeast, and purple non-sulfur bacteria. And the purple, I want to say a special thing on purple sulfur bacteria is that that bacteria is highly adaptable. It can work in different environments. It can work in lakes underwater. It can work in deep soils, in ponds and lakes, with oxygen, without oxygen. And there's a term for that, which is called facultative anaerobes, which means that these microbes can work in an oxygen environment or an anaerobic, a non-oxygen environment. And that's what makes this whole solution here really special, is that it can work in a whole different type of environments, and it helps with so many different types of agricultural practices and whatnot. So some of the other uses is in gardening. You can use it with livestock, with helping uh, deodorize and keep things sanitized in with your livestock. You can use it in human health. This is actually a probiotic drink as well. People use it in water and septic treatment. I've read that they use it in uh, dead zones, that they pour this into dead zones and actually bring those areas back. Dead zones are basically like areas near factories where they're dumping a whole bunch of toxic pollutants, and that all that area there becomes dead. And what they do is they start pouring this effective microorganism solution, and basically bring that uh, area back to life. So it has remediation practices, applications, and you can also use it in organic waste composting. So the pros, let's talk about the pros of Bokashi composting. It accepts a wide variety of food waste. You can put cooked foods, uncooked foods, meats, um, dairy products, and it's suitable for indoor uses. You can use it in office spaces, schools, apartments. If you live in an HOA, it's really, you can use it for that. It's low profile. Um, it's suitable for urban spaces, if you have space constraints, if you're in, like I said, in an apartment or something like that. And the other pro about this system is it has rapid decomposition. It actually, and I've done experiments with this where you can actually see how this starts pre-digesting and breaking down the materials much faster than just traditional composting. And it's scalable. You can start as small as a 5-gallon bucket, and you can increase that all the way up to whatever size you can manage. So some of the drawbacks of Bokashi composting is it requires regular brand Bokashi brand replenishment. It's not ideal for yard waste, like grass clippings, leaves, and things of that nature. And it has potential odor issues if improperly managed. I've been working with this for about 2 years, and I've had buckets that went bad. But there are ways that you can troubleshoot, and you will have maybe a bucket that went bad, here and there. But there are, methods and trouble shooting tips that I'm going to share with you that can help you kind of, avoid those issues. So let's talk about how it works. You have two stages. You have your fermentation stage, which you take your food waste, you put it in an airtight container. Remember, this is an anaerobic process. The microbes can work in both oxygen and non-oxygen, but for this process, you want to have a airtight container, like a gamma seal container here. This is an airtight container. So the first stage is the fermentation process. You want to fill this bucket up with your food scraps and the bran, and you keep filling that up as you go until you fill it up to the rim, and then you close that up. And then the second stage, let me look at my notes real quick. So you're using about, so for every 5-gallon bucket, you're using about 1 pound of Bokashi grain per bucket. And then you basically let it sit for about 2 weeks, depending on the temperature. Ideally anywhere between 60 and 90 degrees is like the sweet spot. That's when you really get a 2-week fermentation. If it's any lower than 60 degrees, then it'll probably be about like a month. It'll take a month to ferment. Um, then you have a composting stage. So when it becomes Bokashi compost, you're basically taking that finished product, that fermented product, and you're integrating it, whether it be in your soils, whether it be in a compost bin, a worm bin, a banana circle. That's when it becomes, that's the second stage. That's the discard stage. After that, 2 to 4 weeks fermentation. So the equipments you need, like I said, are two gamma seal airtight buckets. I recommend 2 buckets because while one is fermenting, during that 2 to 4 week stage, you're gonna want to have a second bucket, second chamber vessel, so that you can start collecting your food scraps in the other one. So you're gonna need the buckets. You're gonna need the bran. whether it be the grain, the Bokashi grain. I have it over there. We're going to look at it in a second. So you can use the grain, or you can use the liquid material, um, the effective microorganisms. You can use them both in the same way, and I'm going to talk about, um, the advantages of each of, comparing both of them in a second. Um, let's talk about tips and troubleshooting. So you want to make sure that the bucket is properly sealed to avoid any odors. I have a bucket at home that has like a little crack here, and I already could smell that it's going a little bad. So you want to make sure, like, if you don't have a sealed container, you want to make sure that is completely sealed so that you can avoid any odors. You don't want any putrefaction. It should not smell. If it smells, something went bad, and one of the things that could have went wrong is that your vessel is not completely airtight. So you want to use extra Bokashi brand if the quality is low. So I highly recommend testing out the quality before you even use the culture. So one way you can test that out is you can use pH testers. So before you even start the process, because remember it takes 2 to 4 weeks for the fermentation process, and you don't want to wait until like the process finishes to know like, oh, the quality that I used isn't good quality. So before you even start fermenting it, I recommend taking some pH strips, testing out the quality of whether you're using the liquid version of it or the dry version, the dry substrate. You want to use pH strips to do that before you even start fermenting. Now, if you just purchased it, then, fine. More than likely that the quality of that is really good. If you're doing it yourself as well, you're going to want to test the quality. And if you're doing it yourself, you want to use more grain. You want to use more grain. The more grain you use, you can't use too much per se. About a pound per vessel, per 5-gallon vessel. So you want to handle bad batches by burying the waste deeper and further away from plants. Now, a bad batch, the way you could tell for a bad batch is if it smells bad, if it smells rancid, it went bad. If you see any um, mold other than white mold, if you have like green mold, black mold, anything like that, the batch went bad. And it's the same way with fermentation. Like, you use your eyes, you use your nose, you know something went bad if it smells bad, and with your sight, you know it went bad if the mold turned a different color other than white. So if that batch went bad, you're gonna want to dig it deeper and further away. Some people say, just throw it out, but I think that doesn't make sense. Just integrate it into your soil. The microbes will figure it out. Like I said, just make sure you dig it deeper or plant it, trench it further away from your plants. So like I said, you got the smell test. It should smell sweet, sour, yeasty, cheesy, like a vinegary smell. It should not smell putrid. The sight test, you want to see white fungal mold. That's a good sign. That's a sign of good active fermentation. Um, the process does have a smell, but it should be more pleasant than unpleasant. Um, you're going to want to run a quality check before you do new batches. I think I mentioned this before, but you're going to want to keep it in between 60 to 90 degrees temperature. Make sure you keep it out of direct sunlight and out of temperatures below 45 degrees. And out of temperatures below 45 degrees. So you want higher temperatures than 45. And you're going to want to make sure that it's below 110 degrees temperature. That'll give you an optimal ferment. So to make the Bokashi brand, I'm gonna say a quick disclaimer. If you just starting out, I highly recommend purchasing high quality commercial grain. But if you're like me or you want to DIY it yourself, it's very simple. You just need you need three materials. You need the culture. You need some sort of substrate. It could be any type of carbon material, rice bran, sawdust, coconut coconut cure, coffee husks, or any type of carbon material. I've heard people use shredded paper to inoculate to make the Bokashi brand. So we're talking about the Bokashi grain right now, the carbon material where you're infusing the effective microorganisms into it. So you can use, so you're going to use the culture, you're going to use the substrate, you're going to use molasses. I recommend unsulfurated blackstrap molasses, and you're going to want to use water. I recommend non-chlorinated water for when you're doing that as well. So it's just those three products: your culture, your substrate, your water. And then you're going to use the standard recipe. And for all these recipes and anything, please reach out to me. I have a handout that I give out to people that has all the materials that I am sharing with you. So if you want the recipe, I'm not going to go into full detail on how to make it right now, but if you want all that information, I have it accessible, and it is, you can find it online as well. But I have a really good handout that I took a lot of time to put together, and I'm really proud of this handout. So reach out to me if you want further information on how to make it. But basically, your standard recipe is 1 part EM to 1 part molasses to 100 parts water. And what that means is, I break it down here where the EM and the molasses are always equal. So the ratios of that are always equal, and the water is 100 times the amount of either molasses or EM. So you're basing your recipe off of your substrate. So however much substrate you have, let's say it's 2 pounds of rice bran, wheat bran. Let's say it's 2 pounds of wheat bran. For every pound you have, you want to add a cup of water. So if you have 2 pounds of wheat bran, you want to have 2 cups of water, and that's what you base your parts off of for the EM and the molasses. There's a couple more details to that, but basically you're fermenting it for 2 weeks, for about 2 to 4 weeks, depending on the temperature. And then after that, you'll have some Bokashi grain that you can use. And basically, like I said, the application for the grain is about 1 pound per 5-gallon bucket. Or you can use 1 tablespoon per cup of food waste. Like I said, more is okay. And these numbers are just guidelines. They're benchmarks. It all depends on what quality you have. Use your smell, use your sight and your smell to make sure that everything is going well. But you're going to want to make sure that you layer these materials up until you get to the top of the vessel. And then for the liquid version of this, you're going to want to dilute it. A lot of these products, they have the recipe on here. I think this one is 1 part of the EM to 10 parts water. And then you're going to want to use about half an ounce for you're going to want to use 8.5 fluid ounces per 5-gallon bucket. That's about equal to 1.5 cups to use this instead of the grain. So let's talk about the grain versus the spray, because you can use either one. You can use the grain version, the dry carbon material version, or you can use the liquid version of this. So the advantages to the grain is it has better quality and longer shelf life. The grain stores for up to 2 years. And then the spray, it's cheaper up front, and it can be diluted to cover more material. I just expanded, so you can make an activated concentrated version of this. So this is about, 32, this is 1 liter. So I just took, the other day I activated this. Basically I concentrated, I took a little bit of this and I made a lot more. I took like about a cup of this material and I expanded it to 2 gallons. So it's much more cost effective to use the liquid version, but the trade-off is the shelf life. The trade-off is the shelf life. This only has about like 6 to 9 months of a shelf life, and the grain, the dry version, the Bokashi grain version, has about 1 to 2 years depending on how you're storing it. So it all depends on which one you want to use. If you just want to use the liquid version, that's totally fine. It'll be cheaper for you, even cheaper for you because you can concentrate it and make a lot more. And I have the recipes on how to make that in the handout as well. Um, and the grain offers consistent quality while the spray may lose its effectiveness. So the activated, the concentrated version I just made, that has like a month shelf life because it's a second generation version of the mother culture. So this one has a 6 to 9 months, but when you actually concentrate it and make an activated version of this, it has a month shelf life. So that's what I have for the kind of the presentation. Now we're gonna get into the live demo and actually like get into how it's done and show you guys, you know, just a quick demonstration of what it looks like. But it's a really simple process. I think for anyone that is intimidated by composting, I think Bokashi composting is the way to get started, or to, you know, jump back into it. Maybe you had some problems, or you know, you just don't have the means to acquire all the ratios for, you know, a traditional thermophilic composting. Bokashi composting is so simple. It's really foolproof. And like I said, it is the gateway to composting because of how simple it is. It really is as simple as I just said before. All you're doing is you're layering your food scraps to the culture, and you're layering all the way to the top. You're closing that up, and that's it. You don't have to do any carbon to nitrogen ratios. It's not complicated like that. It's very simple. You can add whatever food scraps you have, whether it be meat, bones, you know, cooked, uncooked materials. You can add all of those to this. You could even add some liquid materials like dairy, milk, and whatnot. Some of the material I read says that you shouldn't, but I've been experimenting and I've spoken to people and they add liquid materials. And when you think about it, adding liquid materials, these microbes in all the materials that I'm reading are saying that they live in different type of environments. So if you add liquid in there, it should work, and it's been working for me on the buckets that I've had. So you can add some liquid in there. I recommend just experimenting and, you know, starting with a little bit, you know, as you go. But yeah, it's as simple as that. That's all I got for the presentation part of it.
All right. That was great.
And honestly, I should cut that up. I should cut that up because this bucket right here, I'm not sure if you're running, but this bucket right here is an actual experiment that I'm running. I am testing out the quality of this grain right here.
Okay.
So I want to make sure that I keep the conditions in here pretty controlled. So I've been cutting up everything in there, so I will cut up this material on top just to make sure, because I'm testing the quality of this grain here. Now this grain was made with upcycled beer grains. I think this one comes from a brewery in Celebration Brewery. I believe this one came from. But yeah, you can use beer grains to make your Bokashi grain. You can use, like I said, the rice hulls or wheat bran. You typically use wheat bran to make your Bokashi grains, but this one's beer grain. So shout out to Celebration and Grove Roots for showing love and supplying some substrate for me. So I'm going to try to break this up a little bit. Now you'd be breaking this up beforehand. This one is pretty. That's pretty solid there. So I'm not gonna get any better than that, but at least I got the banana peels kind of cut up. All right, and integrated in there. So we're gonna want to do about a cup of grain. Right. And do the same thing here. About a gallon bag, like half a gallon bag. We're gonna add some more. And it's this simple, y'all. All you're doing is repeating that process until you fill up that bucket. Then you're gonna close it up and let it ferment for 2 to 4 weeks. And do not open that lid until after the fermentation. So what I do, you can see it on these buckets right here, is once I seal up that bucket, I put on the date that I'm gonna open it up. Right, this bucket is already about a month, over a month old. So you seal it up and you don't open it. I have not opened this bucket since I closed it. So we're about to see how that smells in a second.
I got a question.
Talk to me.
This one says open 2/21/25, so that hasn't been,
It has not been opened.
has not been opened.
Yeah.
What's the benefit, or is there anything negative if it's left in too long?
No, actually, these buckets, you can leave these buckets closed for like up to a couple years. I've heard people, that's why like you can actually, if you don't have a means to use it at that moment, you can leave it in the bucket for a couple years, and it'll store fine, depending on the quality of the grain. Now, if you're not gardening or anything like that, you can donate it to a gardener or donate it to someone that's gardening or vermicomposting. But yeah, you can leave it in the bucket for a couple years. It's the same thing like pickles. Pickles can last up to like 10 years, and it's basically, now let's open up this bucket. So this is not composting, you're fermenting. So it's not going to look any different than when you first added that material. So this bucket is over a month old. If you leave food scraps in a bucket for over a month, it is going to smell terrible. But because we're using these effective microorganisms, these beneficial microorganisms, it is halting the decomposition process and actually locking in the nutrients and stopping any putrefaction and really bad odors. So I have not opened this bucket. I don't even know how it smells. This will be the first time. This one has a very like acidic, vinegary smell to it.
Get some slices of bread in there. Yeah, actually not too bad for over a month old. Not too bad at all.
Not bad. And there's some Brussels sprouts in there, so
Yeah.
it could have been really bad. And this one is actually SD. This is SD batch, a different type of brand that I'm using. It's not bad. It's actually good quality grain in there. So there's not a lot of fungal activity, but you're not always going to get that. So if you don't have any white spores or white mold in there, it's okay. That's, as long as it doesn't smell putrid, you have a good fermentation. That's not bad. So we're gonna trench this into your yard, into your bed there. I already opened up. That's not the best smelling bucket I've had, that's for sure. I've had sweeter ones, and it all depends what, input, whatever you put in there is kind of what you're gonna get. Like I said, it's not gonna be it shouldn't be an unpleasant smell. It should be, I wouldn't say it's pleasant. I mean, it all depends on who the person is. That's kind of subjective, but it shouldn't smell bad. It shouldn't smell putrid. Now this one, I opened this one before. See, the mold is getting more like gray than white. And I did open this bucket up several times after it was finished, so, it's going a little bad. And I wouldn't even say bad. I mean, it doesn't smell bad. It's ready to integrate into the soil. Let's put it that way. That's a better smelling bucket than this one, I'd say. Right? Like, it's pretty neutral.
Yeah.
This one's good. And this one is, I don't even know what batch I used for that, but that's not bad. See, this is what you're going to get. That's what it's going to smell like. You can have like a more a little bit more sour, acidic. Like this one was a little bit more vinegary. It had a little bit of hint of like, like just a little bit. I smelled a little bit, and that could be because of the Brussels sprouts or whatnot. But it wasn't bad. It didn't kick you in the face, and it wasn't like your neighbor is gonna fight you about it. So this one's not bad. Like I said, I opened up this one previously as well. So let's see what it looks like. See what it looks and smells like. See, this one's sweeter. This one has like a sweet smell. But look at the fungal. This is good. This is a sign of good fermentation.
That one doesn't smell that bad at all.
No. Like the carrots, whatever, like it kind of gives it a more sweeter smell in this one. I'm actually really pleased with the smell and the ferment and the fungal activity here. It's probably one of the best.
Mold.
Yeah, it's probably one of the best buckets I've had.
Okay.
That's good stuff. So we'll integrate. I'm happy with this one. So we'll give you.
So that one says 215. This one says 215. When would they have started? 115?
No, it was 2 weeks before that date.
2 weeks before.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. Since because it's getting warmer now, I'm doing it for 2 weeks.
Okay.
So, yeah, it could be between 2 to 4 weeks. In Florida, honestly, you could pretty much get away with 2 weeks fermentation in Florida. So you're basically going from food scraps to soil in about a month, like 4 to 6 weeks in Florida. And when I say soil, I mean like you're fermenting this, you're trenching this into your soil or adding it to your compost, and you could literally get, like, let's call it a probiotic for the soil in about a month.
Okay.
And the soil will literally swallow this stuff up. You will not see it, recognize it in like a little after a month. So this is like the same way you take probiotics and kombucha and things of that nature. This is exactly the same thing for the soil. So I like to use as above, so below. What is going on in the soil with this probiotic that you're adding into the soil is the same thing that's happening in your gut. You're adding all these pre-digested materials that are bioavailable to your body. So we're fertilizing, we're doing all this fertilizing and whatnot into the soil, and the microbes in the soil don't know what to do with that material because it's not available. But this fermented material is already pre-digested. It's already bioavailable for the microbes to be able to break it down and cycle those nutrients into the soil, to your plants, and into the soil web and whatnot. So it's the same probiotic attributes, and there's even more cool attributes. I have a couple examples here of the antioxidant properties of EM. So here's another cool experiment I did. EM has antioxidant properties. I took these nails here that are non-coated, non-galvanized nails. They're rusted. This is just regular water. I did this a couple days ago, and you see the nails are rusted, right? However, you take this is EM. I added about 1 part EM to 10 parts or 100 parts water, whatever it is, and these nails are not rusted. It's antioxidant. The nails in that one oxidated, this one doesn't. So you could picture your nails like your joints. It's the same property. Your joints are not rusting, and they're not like breaking because of the extreme, the free radicals or whatever it's called. But there's so many good applications to this. The other thing I want to show you guys is although the food scraps are not necessarily breaking down, they're just being pre-digested. The same way you have like pickles, right? If you just fermented pickles, it's still gonna hold some of its texture. But like a year-old pickle, you squish that thing, when you look at it, it looks like a pickle. It has all the structure to it, but when you take it out and squish it, it's gonna break apart. So it's the same application with the Bokashi. It's gonna look the same, but when you poke it or something, it'll break apart. However, with this experiment, so in what is it? Almost about a month ago, I took a half an apple and I put it in here with Terraganics grain. This is a high quality Bokashi grain, and I put an apple in here about a month ago, and that apple is practically gone. Now you have all types of different mold in there. That's according to the Bokashi process.
Was it a
You don't want to
sliced
see that.
apple?
It was a sliced apple. It
Sliced
was
it up? Okay.
half a sliced apple. There you go. But that thing is gone. It's basically, you can see the skin, but it's practically gone here. And I was just comparing my grain versus the commercial grain. And Terraganics is some good stuff. If you're gonna want to buy commercial Bokashi grain, you can go Terraganics, sell some grain, or SD. I think it's SD Works. They sell a grain as well. That's some really high quality stuff. So yeah, you're not gonna want to see any green or anything like that, any mold. I think that's because there wasn't enough grain or something like that in there. But basically, the apple is gone. You just don't find it because the compost that I put in here basically ate it up, and all the organisms that are in the Terraganics, the Bokashi grain, basically just broke it down. So that's Terraganics. This one is the batch number 4. This is the grain that I made. You still see the apple. The apple's still there, but you see the mold. I mean, the apple's pretty soft here. I've done experiments with this where I did side-by-sides. One container had compost. I did one that had vermicompost. And then I did one with with Bokashi grains. And the apple was gone within like half the time. So I'm able to see, like, I do these experiments because you read about this stuff and it seems like hype, but when you run the experiments, I've done the experiments several times. Every time the controlled environment with broke down 3 times faster or half the time or what have you. And I have videos on my Instagram that, kind of show those experiments. But I highly recommend for people to experiment with this stuff and try it out because it's so simple, and I've seen it work various times because I've been teaching and educating people on this. This stuff is legit. I'm not sure why it isn't more known, especially in the States here. It's a lot more known in in East Asia, in Asia, and like UK and stuff like that. But and it is a lot of people are working on it in like San Diego and that part, like California.
Why do you think it's not as known or available?
It's a good question.
Is it cost production?
No, it's actually really cheap.
Education?
It's probably a mixture of education, of also because probably the powers that shouldn't be are suppressing this information. I'm reading so the book that Teruhiga wrote, you can't even find the book in the States. There's no way to purchase it here. You got to purchase it in the UK or something like that. I'm not sure why it's being toggled or suppressed, but some people say that because he was talking about how some of these Teruhiga was talking about how the he was doing experiments and showing that people were using it to like reverse cancer and stuff like that. I mean, think about the body. Like I said, as above, so below. They're using this material to remediate dead zones. So your body could be a dead zone in where the cancer is. So he was talking about how you can use these effective microorganisms the same way you see in this experiment here. It's a probiotic. It's an antioxidant drink. So some people say that it's being suppressed because, he was getting into the whole medical area and saying like, hey, this stuff actually has like healing properties. So they're suppressing the information. But from what I've seen, this stuff is so powerful, so just mind-blowing that I can't understand why it's not more known, especially in Florida and just in the States. Like, I'm not understanding. And maybe, you know, I know it's out there, the information is out there, but I've done I've done like 20 workshops already, and people haven't heard about this stuff, and I'm just like, why? You know. And a lot of the information, even if you just YouTube Bokashi, there isn't as many uh, videos as you would find for like other types of composting. And it's such a simple way to compost, and it really does work, and it's super simple. Like, there's, yeah, a kid could do this easily. You know, a child can do this. So I don't know why, but I'm doing my best to get this information out there so that people can, you know, just pioneer this stuff and work with this material, because it's really cool stuff.
Awesome. Get trenching.
Yeah, let's do that. Anything that does, like, you know, community scale composting with Bokashi, and they were like, we're not doing it just yet, but, you know, we have plans on doing that. So, like, I have talks. Like I said, I worked with a school. Unfortunately, the program stopped, but I want to see this stuff like integrate into our community, because how simple it is, you know.
Yeah.
And we got, you know, these breweries keep popping up. We got the grain, the materials that we can get free materials, upcycle them, and integrate it back in. But yeah, let's do this. Is it running?
Yeah.
Okay, good. Cool. So we're about to do the composting part of Bokashi, where this bucket has been finished for over a month. Really, all you need is 2 weeks, and then after that, you're gonna actually compost it. You're gonna integrate it into the soil. So what we're doing, picture your gut, picture the human gut right here to give a good illustration. What you're doing is you're feeding probiotics to the soil, and the soil biota is just gonna gobble this up, because it is bioly available for it to gobble up. You could throw in, like I said, fertilizers all you want. It doesn't, the soil microbes don't know what to do with that, because it's not readily available. It's kind of bypassing the microbes, so to speak, and going straight to the plants. But with this stuff, you're actually feeding the soil. This organic matter is actually feeding it and becoming a probiotic for the soil, the same way it is for your gut. So I like to use that illustration. Like I said, as above, so below. What we see happening in the soil is happening in our guts. So picture this as kombucha for the soil or what have you, and that'll give you a good illustration of what's going on. But what we're gonna do is we're gonna trench all the way down here. I think they say it's about, like, this is guidelines, you could do whatever, but it's about 3 foot for every 5-gallon bucket. So you're gonna want a 3-foot trench, but we're just gonna go all the way down, and you're gonna want 12 to 18 inches deep hole. Like I said, these are all guidelines. Experiment with this stuff, have fun with it. So we're gonna go through and kind of, it's like a shovel width, or length, I should say. And then before you plant into here, you're gonna want to let this sit. We're gonna trench this in here. You're gonna want to let this sit for about, 4 weeks before you plant anything in there. And it's pretty much compost. You don't got to do all that turning. You can integrate Bokashi into your compost bin, and it'll become like leaf mold. So you can use Bokashi just like leaf mold. You use leaf mold in your traditional compost, in your thermophilic compost, to inoculate it, to infuse it with microbes. So you like to go into the forest or something, like, and find some, just a culture of bacteria to help accelerate your compost process. Bokashi is the same thing. Mike could take this, put it into his bin, and it'll actually jumpstart it. It'll kickstart the system, and infuse it with microbes, so that it could help make that process faster. So the soil's so loose. Just gonna use this guy.
These are all hugelkultur beds, so
Okay.
we dug almost 2 feet out.
Wow.
and just buried branches, leaves,
Okay.
and that was over 2 years ago now. So
Wow. So it's about to get another jump start.
yeah, yeah, and everything I've planted in here has done well. So
Really? Okay.
I'm excited to now that I'm sure it's been depleted so many years later. I'm excited to get some bokashi in here.
Yeah, man. And like I said, I'm leaving you with a couple of those lids and some grain, and let me know how it works out for you. You know, if you're interested in integrating it. Like I said, you don't have to do just bokashi. You can add that to your whole tool belt. I think that's pretty good. So we dug our hole, we dug our trench. Now we're going to, could probably dig this trench a little deeper, but trench this in here. We are feeding the microbes of the soil. They need to eat too. Like, we expect these microbes, we expect the soil to like make our plants get bigger and grow healthy, but we're not giving the soil anything to work with, you know? We expect them to do work the same way we need nutrition and energy and fuel in our bodies to do the work that is expected. Let's smell that real quick. What do you smell?
It smells like fermented vegetables.
That's crazy. Like, and that was over a month. You have food scraps in a bucket for over a month, it's gonna smell. The neighbors are gonna be like hollering at you. You know what I mean? Like, your smell, like, this is what I love, like, doing this workshops and showing people. Like, the proof is in your nostrils. Like, you smelling this.
Yeah.
It's not rancid. You know, this stuff really does work. It's really powerful stuff. And I've been reading a lot about fermentation and gut microbes. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the GAPS diet, the GAPS protocol, but basically it's saying that, you know, if you want to heal yourself, you got to feed your body materials that are already pre-digested. When you're feeding your body all these materials that are just heavy and hard on your body, you're making your body work much harder. That's why, you know, kombucha and sourdough and all these fermentation practices are, you know, really making a huge comeback. And this is all ancient technology. Fermentation is ancient stuff. But I've been reading a lot about how, like, you really want to have mostly fermented diet. Like, you want to have a lot of fermented foods in your diet to like heal your gut and seal your gut lining. Same thing for the soil, man. Like, everything I've been learning all these years when it comes to soil and plant, you know, just growing plants and whatnot, growing food, it's all about the microbes. It's all about the soil. So the more you feed, like, this material here is locked in, you put in compost in here, that stuff has lost a lot of nutrients. It's good stuff. I'm not saying it's bad stuff, but I'm just saying, like, this stuff locked all those nutrients in. Locked it in. Now it's going to slowly release it. You added all that organic matter in here that we're lacking heavily. And it's super easy. This is as simple as it is. From 2 to 4 weeks. And for 4 weeks, we're talking about actually putting, you know, a probiotic to the soil. We're going from compost in 4 weeks. Like, what system do you know that can do that? I've done vermicomposting. I love worms. Worms are great, but it's a lot of maintenance with worms.
I mean, these bins, I don't turn them as much as I should, and some of them are like 1 to 2 years old.
Oh yeah, if it's cold composting, yeah,
Yeah.
it'll take you it'll take you about a year.
Now, I would think rinsing out and pouring that into
Yeah.
these composts,
Yeah, you jumpstart that.
give it a little
Yeah,
boost.
it's like the discard. Remember what I was saying? You're
Right.
using that discard and jump starting that system and activating that whole process there. Yo, it's as simple as this. I want to see schools I want to see homeowners, I want to see people in HOAs that are intimidated by compost process to just do this. Like there's no reason people should be intimidated um, of composting now, especially with something like Bokashi that makes things uber simple. You know, it's that simple.
All right, so I want to thank my man Pablo from Eco Hustle, and hopefully you learned something. I learned a ton. I'm gonna have to go back and watch this several times. I hope you do too. There'll be a full-length video as well as clips, different parts and sections about Bokashi to make it easier for you to absorb this information. Pablo, if someone wants to reach out to you and have their own workshop, what's the best place for them to find you?
Eco.hustle on Instagram and Facebook. We're eco_hustle, I believe it is, but we're the logo with the purple emblem, yeah, with the bag and the worm tie there. So yeah, we're on Instagram, Facebook. You can find us there. We have a link tree as well, where you can find more about us. But yeah, thanks, Mike. I appreciate you sharing your platform with me. And I think there's one thing I could say is, don't take my word for it. Like, really try this stuff out. Really explore the magic of Bokashi. It's so simple. And I just want to inspire and encourage people to do this because it's such an easy way to get into composting and collect your food scraps. And I think it's a beautiful illustration of taking something that is claimed waste and turning it into into gold.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
And the results speak for themselves. Pablo's been recently doing workshops at schools, natural farm here in Central Florida, workshop with what, like 50 people at that one?
Yeah, that was a really good turnout.
Yeah, so, you know, more people are learning about it. Hopefully you're inspired. I've got several composts around here. I've got a worm farm inside, and this is by far not only the most maybe cost effective, but as far as churning out quick compost, it's definitely something that I'm going to incorporate more. So
yeah, it's hands down simple, low maintenance. I think if like we're gonna wrap it up with that, like it's super simple to do. It's low profile. You know, if you're in an HOA situation where you may not be, have the means to acquire the carbon and nitrogen and everything you need for a traditional compost system, Bokashi's where it's at because it's low profile, it's scalable. You can do it in a 5-gallon bucket or can increase it. And like I said, it's as simple as just layering your food scraps with the culture that is in the Bokashi system. So it's that simple. And yeah, reach out to me. I have a handout with all the information that I spoke about, and it's a free handout. I like to empower people with the information. So reach out if you need that. If anything else, I'll share it with you, and you can make it available or what have you. But yeah, I was excited to share that information with everyone and with your subscribers and your channel.
yeah, and we're going to put some of Pablo's affiliate links to some of the products he showed during the demonstration today. It's not a ton of money, but it helps Pablo make some money, and we need more individuals or small scale community type people out there, because you're going to get Pablo. You're not going to get the big corporation whose underlying model is to make money, which is fine. I'm a capitalist. But, this is the guy. This is the real deal. So let's help out Pablo, and we can all help each other. So that's it, my friend. Thank you again.
Thank you, man. Appreciate it.